I decided I would ask one of my good friends, Carolyn, what would you like to see posted next on my site? And she said a pot pie. She loves pot pies. I think she lives for pot pies. So I got to thinking, pot pie. So Carolyn was my inspiration for this next dish that I have today for you. And what it is, it's a pasty, what I call a pasty Calzone-Style. And as you can see, it's right here. What I did in our family, my mother-in-law, she made a wonderful pasty. But she made hers not like this. As you can see, I'm turning it around. She made hers in a big cookie sheet. And her cookie sheet had a pie crust on the bottom, this wonderful filling on the inside, and then she had a big crust on top. Well, I was thinking, my friend Carolyn wanted a pot pie, and I got to thinking, you know, what's even easier than a pot pie, but being able to make these, it's like a tart, it's a calzone style. So I mixed my heritage with my mother-in-law's heritage, and I came up with my own wonderful crust with a little more healthier ingredients for you than the Crisco in the other crust. And I call this my pasty calzone style. I used to make little beef tartlets too out of bread dough. You can go and buy frozen dough or make your own and make little beef tartlets for the family. But I chose to come up with my own little different crust that's a little healthier. And so stay tuned and watch me make my pasty calzone style. Welcome to Chef Debbie's Kitchen, where today we are going to be making a really old family favorite called pasty, which is from the other side of my family. My husband's mother was English, and so she introduced me to this cookie sheet size of pasty that she would make. And that was my husband's favorite every birthday year until he met my side of the family and fell in love with the stuffed shells, so that's what he likes. Anyway, we have great memories from this pasty. So today I'm going to bring it to you, but I'm going to do it Chef Debbie's way. So I'm not going to do the big cookie sheet like my mother-in-law did, but I just want to show you the ingredients we have. I'm using everything she taught me to use, and in this dish I've got small cubed round steak, and over here we have ground chuck, about a half a pound of ground chuck. In the olden days, they used to use venison, but we're using round steak today and extra ground meat. You could use pork, a combination if you'd like. Over here, I've got chopped fresh potatoes, about 3. And in this dish is rutabaga. Yes, let me repeat myself, rutabaga. And over here, we've got my big bowl of, I've got my purple onions and my white. You know me and onions. And the next favorite ingredient that she used was spike. I had never heard of spike. Well, early marriage, who's heard of spike? But this is, to me, her little secret ingredient with some salt and pepper. So, for now, what we're going to do is we're going to prepare the meat by making sure over here we have a nicely preheated cast iron pan. And I've had it on for a while because I have electric stove, so don't forget, things take a little bit longer. I put a little bit extra virgin olive oil in. And I have a bag here of flour, salt, and pepper, of which we are going to put all this cubed steak. So what I did is I bought a big chunk, well, I shouldn't say big. It was only about 1.25 pounds. But look at all there is here. Look at those tiny little small pieces I cut it into. So just have fun with cutting it. Be careful. Make long, thin strips. Turn it around the other side and just make another set of long, thin strips. And then you've got tiny little cubes of your fresh steak. And again, you could use skirt steak. That's very popular today. You can get that at any butcher, or you can just get round steak. Try not to touch this with my hands because then I have to wash it. So that's why I'm having a little difficulty here. So let's do this. Right into the bag we go. So what I'm going to do is just kind of close up my bag, get the flour all around the pieces of steak. See that? Look how fun that is. Yeah, I probably put a little bit more than 2 tablespoons. You don't really need more than probably 2 tablespoons, because now I am going to touch it. We're going to come over here, making sure my skillet is nice and hot, and it is, to the point where I think I better be prepared for the handle, because the handles on the cast iron skillets, these pans are wonderful. They cook so evenly, but they get really hot, so you be careful. So we're going to just shake the dust off. Oh boy. I think I got to do a little better job than that. Lots of flour. So folks, be careful when you make this, so you're not putting too much flour in your pan like I am here. And it sounds like the pan could have still been a little bit hotter, because you don't hear that real high sizzle, do you? So that's a no-no. See, when you learn from me, you learn how to do things, and you also learn how not to do things, which is so exciting at this stage in our game. You know what? It's always good to learn from mistakes, too. You're never too old to learn, and you're never too old to admit, hey, I made a mistake, and there's another way to do something. Always be willing to change and learn, and you will have a very happy life, trust me. Well, there's a lot of pieces of steak in there. Look at that. We're going to hike it up just a wee bit higher. Get rid of that. I'm going to wash my hands over here. Now, when I was talking to you about the vegetables, you want to make sure when you do rutabaga, I wish I had an extra one here, I don't, but the rutabaga, I use about a medium size. Well, I got news for you. Rutabagas come from like this big, this big, this big. So this whole rutabaga that I took, I cut the skin off. It's a very waxy vegetable. It's a root vegetable. And what you want to do is really take all that skin and wax off with your knife carefully. Dice it really small, as you can see here, and then I put it in a steamer pan. See these nice little pieces? And they're nice and tender, because what I did, I steamed them for 7 minutes. Took them out, and this is what you got from that rutabaga. Now, the other thing which is interesting, the rutabaga is a really healthy vegetable for you. As you know, it is in, maybe you don't know, I don't know, it tastes a little bit like a turnip or cabbage or Brussels sprouts. And so when you add a little bit of rutabaga to this dish, it gives it a very delicate sweetness with a hint of a fresh cabbage taste and flavor. It doesn't overtake and overpower, so don't be afraid when you hear the word rutabaga. OMG. No, don't worry about it. Use it. I'm just going to add just a wee bit more oil on my oiling pan. There. Now you hear that sound? Yes, ma'am. That's the sound you want to hear when you're cooking up meat. And as you can see, it's just about coming up the size of the meat. It's browning nicely. We're going to just give it a little stir. Oh, yeah. Look at that. Because then what I'm going to do, after we just get this a little bit brown, we're going to add our ground beef to that. And let that all cook together and let those nice flavors, I'm going to put it up just a little bit. Let those flavors marinate. So, anyways, what we're going to do next, put my meat over here so I don't forget to do that. We are going to start my crust. Now again, I said, this is not the normal crust that you would make for English pasty. And you would normally put in Crisco. I chose not to. I really like to cook more on the healthier side. So in my bowl here, I've just got flour, baking powder, and salt. Okay, and I'm just making a little well. And in that well, we're going to drop in 1/3 of a cup of my nice extra virgin olive oil. If you really don't want to use extra virgin olive oil, don't, but I'll tell you what, you're really missing that extra flavor. And I'm going to do 1 egg, 1 whole egg, yep, that's what I said, 1 whole egg. And we're going to add, before we add our next, we're going to come over here, because I hear it sizzling, I put it up, look at that now. Now it's getting nice and brown. Hang on 1 second. Whoops. We don't want to lose it. Look at that. See how nice that's looking? Oh, if you could just smell it. Some of them are brown more than others. That's okay, because now we want to add in our 1/2 pound of ground beef that I got also from my butcher. I actually bought ground chuck. There, just kind of mash that down. Okay, we're going to lower it just a wee bit. That out of our way. And this is part of our filling now. We're going to add our vegetables to this. Oh, that's nice. There's nothing like the smell of a good meat brownie. Okay. Okay, now look at how nicely our ground chuck has browned, and it's all mixed together. It almost has like a creamy gravy look, because remember, that's why we put the flour inside, or the meat in the flour together, because that is what's going to thicken it. And now I'm just adding my potatoes. I'm adding my rutabaga. Look at that beautiful color those rutabagas are. And my onions. And you're like, whoa, that's a lot of pasty and filling, isn't it? And it is. And we are going to make quite a few little, you can call them little tarts. You can call them little calzones. You can call them pies, because the word pasty means pie. And that's what they used way back then. They would make like little moon size. They look like little half moons. And the people would take them to work. The miners would take them. The fishermen would take them to work. Now we're going to let this just kind of work together. There's no magical time as far as cooking this. We just want to incorporate it all. We're going to add some salt, pepper, and remember our famous ingredient, spike. We're going to add about 1.5 teaspoons of that, and about 1 teaspoon of pepper, and a good teaspoon of salt. And that is really going to be all the ingredients we need. Get these out of the way to flavor. And now, because this skillet is a cast iron, I can turn it right off, because you don't have to cook these together. We just want the flavors to just kind of marry a little bit with the seasoning in the skillet, because we're going to go back to our making our filling, our dough. That's our filling. And remember here I put in the egg, the oil, and now I've got 1/2 cup of water. And we're just going to stir that around, and we are going to make the dough that we are going to use to not put it in my I'm not going to put it in the cookie tray. I am going to make little, not pot pies, but like calzones, little half circle pieces of pasty. And what's good about doing this is they're good to freeze. You can pull them out of your freezer once you've made them and cooked them. You just have to heat them up for the kids, and you got a really, really good snack. All right. So what I've done is I divided this dough into 6 pieces, and over here, wait a minute, 2, 4, yeah, 6. There's a lot already done. We did 5, and I thought you'd like to see how we do it. We just get the rolling pin and use plenty of flour. Make them in about a, oh, I don't know, maybe a 6-7 inch circle, okay? And then we're going to just bring it over here to our little pizza pan and just fill it on one side with a few mounding tablespoons. I just do about maybe 2.5. There's a lot of filling in these guys. And then bring it over. Take your fork. Let's get these out. Take your fork and bring up the edges and just push down, crimp it down with your fork. You know what I thought was funny when I read what the miners used to do? These are a couple myths. I don't know if they're true or not. Myths usually aren't, but anyway, the miners would take these to work. Of course, they would wrap it in their little napkin, their wives, and give them their little moon-shaped pasties. And then they would take it to work, and they said, the joke was, we're going to make a couple slits here too now. The joke was that, take our melted butter, and we're going to put a little melted butter into these holes, okay? Just to give it a little bit of more flavor and some extra steam. And then on the outside, I'm going to just finish brushing this one. And I have a preheated 450 degree oven. We're going to pop these into for 10 minutes. And then we're going to bring it down to 350 degrees for 30 minutes. So anyway, back to the miners. The funny thing was, they would, there we go. That's what they look like. Look at how big those are. So the miners would take the pasty, and the joke was, if they could take the pasty, throw it down, drop it right down the mine shaft, and it held together, it was a good pasty. The other thing too, it had to be firm enough because the miners' hands were so dirty that they had to just eat down there. And so they would hold it by one end, and as they ate it, the end that was left with their hand, they would just drop it into the ground because they didn't want to ingest that. And the other funny myth was the fishermen would take it out to sea, and then after a while, it was like bad luck, you know. It was like if they took it out, it was like no way, you know. So there's just a couple fun things I was reading. The other thing too is you do not put carrots in pasty. That was highly frowned upon. So we're going to stick these into our oven, and we'll come back and see what they look like when they're done. Well, here are our little pasty pies, and we've taken them out of the oven. They've been out for a few minutes now, and they look adorable, don't they? We're going to just cut one in half. I don't think I need the whole. Listen to that nice crust. Look at this. Look at that. Look at the steam coming out of there. Doesn't that look wonderful? And I'll tell you what, making this crust with the oil and the egg and baking powder made it a much more tender crust, and it's a lot healthier for you. Now that melts in my mouth. Awesome. The spike is just enough of a flavor that you go, what is in here? And I remember when I was introduced to it many years ago when our first oldest, Rebecca, she was just maybe a year and a half, and my father-in-law made her eat raw zucchini by sprinkling some spike on her zucchini. So try it. And this crust, instead of putting that Crisco, it's not good for your arteries, use a good olive oil. Whether you're diabetic or not, this is a healthy meal. Or you can freeze them, pop them out of the freezer and have them for kids for lunch, have your husband take them to work. It's a real treat. So I hope you enjoy my little pasty pies. And look for me on my website at memorableFoodDishes.com. Enjoy.